We think the future of retail is retail everywhere. So many people have something that they make or build that is truly meaningful to them. And sharing that with the world, I think is incredible.
Welcome to The Big Question, the series from Euronews where we speak to some of the biggest names in business. Today, I'm chatting to Harley Finkelstein, the president of Shopify. So great to have you.
Great to be here.
So first of all, can you just tell me a little bit about what Shopify is and what Shopify does?
Sure. Ultimately, Shopify is a commerce platform. We make it really easy for anyone to sell a product online, offline, everywhere in between, on social media platforms, our marketplaces. We're about 11% of market share in terms of e-commerce in the US. In the top 5 European countries, we're about 6%, so we had some real room to grow here. And ultimately, we believe the future of retail is not just online or just offline, it's retail everywhere. And what we're trying to create is the world's first retail operating system. So whether you're at your mom's kitchen table getting set up, or you're Ami Paris, you can build an incredible business and keep growing your business using Shopify.
So Shopify has existed since like 2006, and then you came on board in 2009. How, in that time since you started, how have you seen the retail industry change?
There is something remarkable happening, particularly in Europe, which is that a lot of these very large brands, high-end brands, fashion houses, for the first time ever are looking to digitalize. So the brands that said, we're never gonna sell online, they're actually now selling online, but they're doing it in a way that really feels unique to their brand. Part of it is that about 50% of consumers are telling us that they expect digital products and digital experiences from their favorite brands. Like when you think about Paulin or Isabelle Marant or The Row or Donna Karan, these are brands that really focus on a physical retail experience. And they're now finding ways with Shopify to actually create an amazing experience online too. And what I think they're discovering is that consumers want to buy in the way that's most convenient for them. And that if you want to be a relevant modern brand in the future, you have to be able to sell across every surface area where consumers are spending their time, and that's what we power as well.
So you operate in more than 175 different countries. So from your kind of view of the whole world, how does the current economic situation in Europe compare to that of North America, for example?
But from an economic perspective, what we're seeing in Europe in particular is that consumers are voting with their wallets to buy from brands they love, that there's really more intentionality. Rather than buying 10 products indiscriminately, they're choosing the 3 products that are really meaningful to them from brands they really love. And direct to consumer, which I think historically was a bit of a fad, is really becoming steady state, that whenever possible, consumers are actually buying direct from the brands they really love.
And social media, how important is that now, and how does that kind of play into the work you do?
It's quite amazing because social media is this incredibly democratizing marketing tactic where instead of traditional marketing or traditional advertising where the company with the most amount of money always won, now the company with the most creativity wins. You take a brand like Gymshark, for example, which is now a billion-dollar brand that didn't exist even 10 years ago. They were able to build a multi-billion-dollar brand specifically by targeting great consumers and fans and personal trainers initially using social media. But more recently, what we're also seeing is that social media is actually a great channel for commerce. And so we've partnered with companies like Google and Meta and Instagram and TikTok and Snap to really enable commerce natively on those platforms. And that's all powered by Shopify.
So right back at the start of Shopify, you were actually one of the first sellers there before you joined the company. How have you used your experience of using the platform to then help people now?
One of the reasons that I joined Shopify was, I remember I was in law school at the time, sitting in tax law class, kind of a boring class, and I was building my t-shirt business on Shopify. As one of the earliest merchants. And I remember hitting that launch button to go live. And immediately I was selling to a global audience all over the world. And it changed my life. It allowed me to pay for school and help me support my family. But more importantly, it showed me that the future of retail is default global, that it doesn't really matter how much capital you have. It matters how much passion, how good your brand is, how great your product is. It felt like there's sort of this new era of entrepreneurship that is much more inviting. And Shopify's entire mission is simply just to make it a little bit easier to get started, a little bit easier to be successful when you're starting a company. And we think a world with more entrepreneurs is much more colorful, interesting world, and we're trying to create more entrepreneurship on the globe. Now, it doesn't mean everyone's going to succeed. Businesses do fail, and that's okay. But what we're trying to do is reduce the cost of failure, so that if you try something that doesn't work, you can try something else.
Yes.
And while a lot of people talk about stories like Gymshark, for example, what you may not know is that Gymshark was not Ben's first company. He tried a few things before landing on Gymshark, which turned out to be this huge business. And I think now Ben is the youngest billionaire ever in the UK, which is pretty incredible. But that idea of making it easier to keep trying things and seeing what works, and then once you find a business that does work, doubling down on it, that's what Shopify exists for.
So is e-commerce the death of in-store shopping, or is it mutually exclusive, or can they work hand in hand?
Yeah, not at all. In fact, I think e-commerce is simply a new channel that allows consumers to connect with the brands they love. We think the future retail is retail everywhere. We think that having great in-store matters, great online matters, great social media matters, but it really matters, what specifically matters most is, do these brands and do these retailers have deep empathy for their consumer? Do they understand how their consumer is shopping? And when you do, what you can do is you can then reverse engineer where you actually want to have commerce take place. And for a lot of great brands, in-store, high street, having a great physical retail location really, really matters. But again, it's not necessarily one versus the other. It's retail everywhere.
I mean, that sounds like quite a big task if you've kind of got to be everywhere. How difficult is that for a small business?
Well, that's the great part. You can start in one channel, let's say online store, and you can begin to transact there, build your business there. And then maybe you experiment with a pop-up store and say, how is that going? You take the Glossiers, for example. During the pandemic, when most physical retailers were shutting their doors, closing down their stores, Glossier was looking at building more space, knowing that on the other side of the pandemic, they want to create the most rich, interesting environment in store. And now that the pandemic is over, you walk into a Glossier store, it's an amazing experience. You go to the Glossier website, it's an amazing experience. It all kind of fits beautifully together.
From your experience of working with businesses of all size, is there a kind of a secret to success in 2024? What does a business need to do to be successful?
We have millions of businesses on Shopify selling all over the world. The businesses that are most successful, one, have a really good understanding of their customer. They know who their customer is, how they buy, what their preferences are. Two, they have a great product. I mean, great marketing, great content, that's all important. But if you don't have the best product, it doesn't really matter. And so understanding that your value equation, the cost of value has to be really on the side of value. That's second. And the third of all is that your consumers actually turn into net promoters or influencers of your brand. When you have a brand or a business where every one of your customers also is telling other people to buy your brand, that's where you actually create the biggest, most robust and resilient companies. I mean, look at a company like Figs, for example, which is really disrupting the hospital scrub business, the doctor scrub business. Publicly traded company today, started by Heather and Trina, literally at their kitchen table, and decided that doctors and frontline workers should be more comfortable, should look better. And by going to work on this, I think in 2012, they were able to build this massive billion-dollar brand that is now publicly traded. So one of the things they did really well was they took an industry and a product that really wasn't cared for. I mean, most people took for granted that when you work at a hospital or you work at a clinic, you have to kind of wear these things. Well, they said, we can do this better. And so not only did they do it better, but then they had this incredible ambition to change all of it, and they've affected an entire industry that probably hasn't been disrupted in 50 years or so. We're seeing all this great success, all this great new color in the world of entrepreneurship. And again, I think ambition powers it, culture powers it, but ultimately it's the technology layer that Shopify provides that allows for this massive scale.
With 80% of new e-commerce businesses failing, I guess the big question is there a trend amongst the failures? What are they doing wrong? What is their downfall?
Well, often, not every business is going to succeed, as I mentioned. What we're trying to do from a business model perspective is, on Shopify, is we want to make sure that the ones that do succeed offset the costs of the ones that don't for us. But also over time, making sure that as they grow, they never have to leave the platform. But for the ones that don't succeed, what we want to do is make sure that the cost of failure is so low that they'll give it another shot. And eventually, what we find is that people do eventually succeed. What's really important, though, is to effectively have that resiliency that if sales are down 1 week to the next, you don't quit, you keep going. Now, here's where technology really plays a great role here. There's all these new tools that are available through Shopify that make success a little bit more likely and the cost of failure a little bit less. We have a product called Shopify Audiences, for example, which really increases the return on ad spend so that if you're using Shopify, before you run an ad or ad copy, you actually feed your ad copy through our Audiences algorithm, and we give you a lookalike audience to ensure that you have a higher return on your money spent. But I think entrepreneurship today is this wonderful thing where people can take something they love, And again, not everyone has to commercialize their hobby, but so many people have something that they make or build that is truly meaningful to them. And sharing that with the world, I think is incredible. And you can do that on Shopify for like $39 a month. Feels like a pretty good way to build your future, your life, and potentially find your life's work.
So I guess that brings me to my final question. So looking into the future, how do you envisage, say, the next 5 years for Shopify? Does AI play a role? And if so, how is AI going to play a role?
But on the AI front, that's where this gets really interesting, because we have a product called Shopify Magic, which is our AI product that's embedded all across all of Shopify's features and functionality. And the reason it's so exciting to me is because ultimately, this is a real leveling of the playing field. So take something like product descriptions or product photography. If you're a small business and you're competing with a big company, that big company may have an entire team of people working on product descriptions or product photography. Well, now with AI, these small and medium-sized businesses, they can write better product descriptions, they can take better product photography. AI is such an amazing tool to level that playing field so that they can better compete with the largest companies on the planet. I think Shopify is one of the companies best positioned to leverage AI for future success for us and for our merchants. And I love the fact that these iconic brands that have been around in some cases for hundreds of years are finally turning to Shopify to say, we want to have an online experience that is equal to our offline experience.
Brilliant. Yeah, so AI is really going to help small businesses kind of level up and match some of the bigger organizations.
That's exactly right.
Wonderful. That sounds very exciting. Well, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Question today. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.